pleased to tell you that I have several items, each of which is directly related to the planning of this site, to mention to you today. I'm also pleased to say that all of those were a substantial part, of the discussions of this master plan as it was adopted nearly a decade ago. And so what I'm pointing out to you are differences that I perceive in the change that I would ask you to look very, very closely at before moving forward with any approvals of the change to the master plan. The first is the movement of pedestrians north and south through the site. The primary access for pedestrians is from 3 points: Federal Street, which is to the east of the site, Merchant Street, which is behind the Clark Candy building in the middle of the site, and then Allegheny Avenue, which is just to the north of Heinz Field. Federal Street and Allegheny Avenue can access directly across the site by coming down to General Robinson Street. But the Merchant Street entrance, the one that comes down right behind the Clark Candy building and then crosses under Route 65, is the only way that people in a core middle portion of the north side can be, as pedestrians, accessing this development. And I would simply ask you to pay very close attention to a pedestrian walkway leading from Merchant Street as it crosses Reedsdale down to the river through the center of the site, essentially under the Fort Duquesne Bridge. That had been discussed at great length in the last plan, and I see some changes in this plan. I don't have enough time to go into that, but if you would pay close attention to that, including the fact that inside the triangle of the bridge, where we now see surface parking lots for the Hyatt Hotel and some trees in the surface parking lot, that in the former iteration of this master plan was a landscaped park area. It was an important piece of landscaping because it served as the entrance for these pedestrians who were coming out of the subway station, which is in the Intermodal Transportation Center right adjacent to that. So within that little triangle where you're currently seeing surface parking for the Hyatt Hotel, that was supposed to be a park, and there was an important reason for that, for pedestrian traffic from the subway station as well as from the north side neighborhoods. The second item is the subject of parking. We understand that it's the Sports and Exhibition Authority that is responsible for building out the parking spaces in structured parking that are to replace the surface parking as the surface parking is taken out for development. However, there needs to be linkage between when those things happen. I think it's fairly common knowledge that SEA does not at this time anticipate that they have the borrowing power to construct more parking structure. Only phase 1 of the Intermodal Transportation Center, where the subway station is, has been built. Phase 2 is another, I believe it's 800 to 900 parking spaces on the north face of that building over top of what has currently been constructed below grade as the subway station. What I'm saying very directly is that even though right now there has been an increase of 100 parking spaces in the North Shore with the development, we are very, very quickly approaching a point where we will be in negative numbers with that. There needs to be linkage between square feet of building going up and parking spaces being developed in structured parking. SEA needs to be actively involved in that plan, and there must be linkage. If they're not building the structured parking to replace those parking spaces, they shouldn't be building the building that's going to create the demand for those parking spaces. And finally, I will jump into one final piece, and that is that within this plan, there is a great deal of activity planned with height, and there were height restrictions agreed to by all parties, and it was actively negotiated nearly 10 years ago when this subject first came through. I would urge you to maintain the current height restrictions. Those restrictions were important to the communities, and by allowing those restrictions to now be waived, it essentially negates all of the negotiation that took place the last time. There were trades for the heights that were given, and the developers got some things that the neighborhoods didn't want them to have in return for the neighborhoods getting those height restrictions. To 8 years later come back and eliminate the height restrictions is simply unfair to the neighborhoods. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.